So, another addition to some more topics around the individual in a family, and maybe an attempt to just not create a gloss around um, some of the way identities can build within families, and we try to kind of create generalizations without allowing each individual to kind of appreciate who they are, maybe outside of the family and within just the context of who they are or who they want to become. Um, I'm not really familiar with how things are right now in the public school system with regards to health classes and um, how early on teachers and classes uh, discuss sexuality in health or gym class. I remember when I was in school, I think it started in grade 7, maybe grade 6, that these topics became something that was just part of the curriculum. And I remember how it started was usually because we are going through puberty and body odor becomes a thing. So it was almost the segue was, as we're growing older, you need to start thinking about antiperspirant or deodorant, taking regular baths. And they did it in a kind of comedic way. So it was very engaging. Like they give us these kind of workout worksheets and talk just about like what we understand about adult development, but geared to like maybe 11 or 12-year olds. Now, I think just a few years ago, there was some concern against how early we should kind of teach about sexuality. And it's an important thing to think about because sometimes the idea is, and I think this is a fallacy, sometimes the idea is that if you teach something, it gives people ideas and then they want to go explore it. So you can say, okay, but what's the alternative? The alternative is they don't know anything about something and then they're going to go try to figure it out anyway because they're curious. And what if they go about it the wrong way or they learn from somebody that maybe isn't going to be able to teach them in an adequate way? Or maybe, and by saying that, I mean in a way that allows their curiosity and the questions and the kind of the atmosphere and the ambience to remain open and welcoming rather than create like unresolved or like maybe this is taboo when it really shouldn't be. It should be something that's really comfortable and this is just your body and there any scripture, the body's something that's praised and it's revered as, this is almost something that carries your spirit. So just like you have a car, for example, or you live in a house, you want to keep it beautiful and your body's important to you and you have to also know how it works and make sure you know how to take care of it. So it might have been, I think, in grade 4 that the suggestion was, is that too young to talk to children about sexuality? And I'm not really going to say what the correct age is. For me, when I used to work with um, children in preschool, for example, when they're all going to the washroom, they're exploring their body, right? And sometimes it's boys and girls and it's open stalls, like there might be 3 or 4 toilets, and there's different early childhood educators in there changing diapers depending on if they're toddlers in there, some who are toilet training, and they're just curious about their bodies. And we label the anatomy correctly so that um, they already know that there's a proper name for anything. And then as they grow older into their teen years, then slang starts to come in, and they just evolve with it naturally. So I don't understand where the discomfort can be, even though I do understand where it is, because as adults, sometimes we don't know how to simplify something because we haven't really learned yet how to create a simplified variation of some explanations, especially in some of these more conservative communities where we don't really talk about it until you talk about it as a couple, and at that point you're getting married or you're already married, and hopefully you'll figure it out as you go. So think about that as someone who lives in a culture right now, and like for example in the West, and around them, sexuality is a norm, and everyone's having like normal relationships. They can talk about it, and it's just a norm. And you're almost expected from your family maybe or your community to kind of stay about like a few steps behind it, or like keep an about face as though, should I look like I don't know or like I don't care to know. And for me growing up, it wasn't really something that I maybe thought about too much because the group of friends that I had were girls who were kind of quiet or maybe like introverted like me and to some degree. So relationships wasn't really a thing until maybe high school or after that. But now I think it's a lot younger that kids are trying to understand something about what attraction is and what is it like to have a girlfriend and what is it like to have a boyfriend. I'm not going to judge what that is, but I think it is important to help us understand just how to talk with other genders, because then some of the socialized stigmas and stereotypes around the other gender or the other sex can almost dissolve or be worked out and resolved. And then later on in relationships, I think things might be a little bit easier. So there's also the context of sexuality with a person's individual self. So sometimes questions about like what is a safe sexual practice? Like sometimes you think, if let's assume a couple, I'm part of a couple right now, and I'm getting married. Am I allowed to ask questions about sexuality? Like, who do I talk to? And then do I go to the pastor, or like a priest or a minister, or am I just expected to kind of learn this on my own? And then in the process of getting to know somebody, are we allowed to talk about this? And is it assumed that I felt like I'm pious, that I'm not interested in any of like that sexual part of me? So these are things that you can't really know until you talk about them. And if you don't talk about them and you expect that, yeah, it's part of who we are, and then you get married and then you find yourself disappointed, then it's just like, well, yeah, we didn't know. And the reason that I want to almost emphasize this is because in some cultures, celibacy is a thing. In Islam, it's not really something that's encouraged, because, like Taoism, it's almost encouraged to always follow your instincts. And if there's something that um, is counter to your natural instinct and you want to try it, you should do it for a limited amount of time, kind of like fasting, or retreating for a little bit during the ninth month, when Muslims typically do fast. So in thinking about this, sometimes, and I think this is a norm, like sexuality sometimes becomes something that's, depending on your age and your group of friends, that could be very easily judged, and then stigmas and stereotypes can be kind of created. And it's such a sensitive issue because we have different ideas about what it is. And depending on your personality, you might be comfortable with different ways of thinking about it, and with what gender. And um, like in some cultures who can have polygamy, like would you consider more than one partner? So these are really healthy questions to have, and they're very natural to who we are as curious human beings. Like we're thinking about the universe outside of ourselves, and now we have to kind of draw closer to how to create a unique self, right? So something that I've started to think about recently is prostitution, because there is a narration in Islam where there's a woman who was a prostitute, and she went to heaven because she freed a cat, or she fed a cat, or gave a cat to drink. So the assumption or the understanding here is that you can never really know what drives a person's behavior. You can't judge it. But by judging that, like that scenario there, it's she just seems to want to give of herself. And we know that of women sometimes, like they just love to give, and they're very compassionate. Men maybe socialize a little bit differently. That's not necessarily true all the time. But the idea is that it's difficult to know what is correct sexual behavior, right? And sometimes women have it a little bit harder than men. Like if they look a certain way, then it's almost like a write off, and that's it. The rest of your life, you're stuck with this title or this label. So I started actually putting myself in these uncomfortable positions. Like I'd walk around, like go on my Facebook group. Like I put myself as though I'm challenging myself. Like what if I was a prostitute in a previous life? Like what if that's my ghost and my shadow, and I have to kind of come to terms with it? And then I started to think about like sexual pleasure for myself, and like masturbation, and like sex toys and all of these things. And to me, it became almost something that's, because, like, as I mentioned, sometimes the more we discuss or engage with a subject or a topic, it doesn't seem so out of reach or unnormal, or like too taboo or anything like that. It just becomes normalized. And then we're happy to talk about it. And we're actually looking for ways to kind of bring it into discussion and be like, hey, have you wondered about this? Or like, have you ever driven by one of those stores and wondered, like, do I want to go in there and just see, like, what is it like? And I'm sure everybody does think about it. Sometimes we just don't have the courage, or like the group of friends to support it and say, well, yeah, maybe we should. Or I don't know. Like it's something I'm happy to kind of open up and discuss, because in a community where people are trying to learn, and we do want to continue to bridge between cultures and understandings, um, having this way of not making people comfortable around these subjects, I think is a good start. So it's almost think about it beforehand, and then kind of have an idea of where would you draw like a limit about before I talk about this any further, I need to be able to find a way out so I can think about it more and not make people uncomfortable or it gets awkward or anything like that. So I made this one short just because it is something that I don't want to put my own ideas into. But just to have everybody kind of think about it on their own, draw their own conclusions, and then they won't feel like there's already a standard from a guy's perspective or a girl's perspective that they should kind of meander around or kind of like stay close to, but just enjoy something that that God praises. Like there's a tradition where um, someone asked, I think a companion asked the prophet if like almost in kind of like amazement, like if a couple are actually having intimacy together, are they rewarded? And the prophet's response was, if they're holding themselves back and waiting until they find like a compatible relationship and in doing so are seeking like some kind of higher reward, of course they'll be rewarded for it. So you can imagine how all these like nuances and metaphysical meanings about wanting to create any kind of meaning in everything that you do will be something that rewards you in a deeper sense of who you become and then who you end up meeting in life and interacting with and building a life around. So hopefully some more discussion ideas to come together with.